Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm Jason Gibbs, alongside senior staff writer Kelsey Russo. That's right, I'm giving you a promotion.
Woohoo!
Gribble, pay her. It's fine. There we go. Welcome to Cleveland Browns Daily on a Sun Splash Thursday. Sweet 16. We'll get to that in a little bit, G-Man. Austin Ward from 97.1 The Fan in Columbus will join us at 1:20. At 1:40, Tyvis Powell and Gerard Cherry join me. But for the next half hour, Kelsey Russo joins us. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. We're rolling through things. 4 weeks from today, the NFL Draft, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Probably be a foot of snow. Probably be about 20 below.
Probably. That would check, right?
Yep, exactly. that will be the end all be all, I think, for the NFL Draft. Now, that being said, the Browns remain at pick number 2. Adam Schefter yesterday, dropping a little Schefter bomb at like 5 o'clock as I was trying to leave here. Hey, I think the Browns right now at 2, they're going to take Abdul Carter. In this room, maybe not the most popular pick. Is it the best pick? It could be if the Browns brass feels that way. On our end, we've talked about it, that maybe there doesn't need to be another defensive end in an already talented and deep defensive end room. However, if they feel that he's the guy, then he will be the guy. 4 weeks from today, we will know. But if you take a look at things, mock draft madness, something with Dak Prescott yesterday, silly season, Kelsey, is officially here.
It's here. Everything is – there are so many rumors going around. There's no consensus about who's going to go where, which leaves so much up for interpretation of who's going to be available at 2, who's taken at 1, et cetera, and where do the Browns go. It just leaves so much up for interpretation at this point, and we've still got 4 weeks, which it's going to get even crazier as we get closer, because that's how this always goes. Just as you get closer, people want to try to predict. And, I think it's really interesting because there is no consensus about, honestly, what's going to happen at number 1 is leading to this at number 2. And why, when you look at mocks across, so many platforms, there is no consensus of it could be Cam, it could be Travis Hunter, it could be Carter. Like there's everybody's name is still floating around at that spot. And so it's a big kind of shrug at this point of wondering who's going to be there.
Yeah. I mean, and yet the Browns are in a great position with whatever the Titans end up doing. And I know Nathan brought it up the other day. Your options are to stand pat at 2, and maybe Cam Ward is there. If not, Shedeur Sanders is going to be there. If you don't want a quarterback, well, you've got a couple other options as well. If you want to trade back, you can do that if you feel like maybe you don't want any of these guys and you want to generate a few more assets. You could do that by moving back in the draft. There are just so many options as it pertains to this football team and what they can or can't do. And, there's news out this morning, rap sheet saying that the Browns brass is going to privately work out Shedeur Sanders now. And then Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports reporting Abdul Carter's not going to do anything at the Penn State Pro Day tomorrow. So there's some question marks then with him. What do you make of all of this?
It's a lot of information, and it's tough to kind of take in because it's just there's so many different factors, and you're like, okay, well, one piece of information may lead you to think one thing, another, because there was that report yesterday that they worked out Cam Ward as well, and so that plays a factor into this as well. So while there's so much information, it's also not necessarily shocking because we're still in this evaluation process for these teams. Now that we're in pro days, brass for the Browns, but also around the league, they're going to see these players up close at their pro days, coming off the combine, coming off those interviews. They're having their top 30 visits, etc. So these are all steps in this process that I think are really good, indications of where this is going to go. But, it's still kind of early for these final decisions to be happening because there's so many factors in this leading up to it. While we're through the first kind of wave of free agency, there's still things that could happen and technically in free agency up to the draft that could affect what ends up happening. So it's all really good piece of information to take in, but it's also have to remember, okay, we still got a lot of time before we figure out what's going to happen.
Correct. How many more times is Adam Schefter going to drop I think the Browns are going to take so-and-so. And you go, are we sure?
Yeah.
No, maybe tomorrow it'll be someone different.
Right. Yeah, it's like, okay.
And a lot of it is the clickbait. Not that these guys don't know what they're talking about, but, it depends on the information being disseminated, who wants it out there, why do they want it out there, and, maybe we get a little more clarity. I know you'll be at the owners' meetings, the NFL's annual meetings, as Andrew Siciliano called them.
Yes.
Not the owners' meetings. It's the annual meeting for the NFL in Florida. And obviously coaches' breakfast on Monday. So we'll have a little bit better idea. And maybe there's a meeting with the Haslams, Andrew Berry. Jimmy Haslam reportedly was at Cam Ward's private workout with our top brass as well. So, there's a lot to come and a lot still to happen here over the next 4 weeks or so, 4 weeks from today when the NFL draft takes place. All right, you made us do mock drafts. That's right, she made us.
I did.
You had Cam Ward at pick number 2. Was that a hope or was that would you like Cam Ward?
I would. It was a hope.
Okay.
It's, I think, because again, it so much depends on where the Titans go and what they see as their top need. Is it a quarterback? Is it somebody like Abdul Carter on the edge? And that plays such a big factor, obviously, of where the Browns go. So the hope I was thinking was they take Abdul, which leaves the door open for the Browns to take Cam. And I think he's just a great fit from when we talked to him at the Combine, when he did his press conference. His maturity and his poise, I thought, really stood out of just how he handled all of that and how he views himself. And, not that there's not areas for his game to grow, but I think he could come in and really develop in this type of system and succeed, especially, depending on if the Browns add a veteran quarterback, and we'll see what happens. But even somebody under like Kenny Pickett, who has a couple years of experience, to learn from him and figure out the nuances of the league. So, that's still hope. I still kind of stick to that. If he is available out at 2, I think he's the way to go.
And it could be possible. The way the Titans are sending things out, we really don't know. Maybe Abdul Carter is number 1 on their list. Maybe Travis Hunter is number 1 on their list. Maybe Shadur Sanders is number 1 on their list. There's still a lot to gather. Based on the contingent they sent to Cam Ward's Pro Day, I would tend to think that they're leaning towards Cam Ward, but if Abdul Carter is not working out tomorrow, we're not going to know exactly what that contingent looks like. If they had sent everybody to that, then okay, maybe they're just trying to take us all down a road and keep us guessing for the next 4 weeks. All right, later on in the draft, I'm not holding you to this. It's mock draft 1.0. I went all over the place. I had us taking Harold Fannin at one point, my favorite tight end for Bowling Green State University.
I support it.
Thank you. You had offensive tackle in the second round, Josh Connerly. You had Quinn Junkins from Ohio State at pick 67 in the third round. I feel like he's working his way up.
I do too.
And I got a bad feeling. I don't know if he'll be there when we pick at 33. Travion Henderson might be there, and Judkins could still be there. But if you look at this football team and what they've done in free agency so far, the additions, the guys we brought back so far, what is the top need on an offensive side of the football, and what is the top need on the defensive side? Overall, top need is quarterback.
Sure.
We all understand that. But what is the top need on offense, and what is the top need on defense?
I think, seeing how free agency has played out, I think that top need on the offensive side is running back or wide receiver. I think you target one of those two positions or both in that sense in those top kind of second round, third round picks. They added Cornelius Lucas, who brings such an option as a tackle, as a swing tackle for the offensive line, especially as they kind of await DeJuan Jones and his return. And, you add the guard, oh my gosh.
Jenkins,
yes.
Thank
you. Sorry.
I got you.
Blanked for a second. But another option for depth. And I think that's really what this offensive line needs. When you have Joel Bitonio coming back for 2025, which is a really big boost from not only a veteran presence, but a leadership presence and just what he brings to this offensive line. once you have a really healthy group, when we saw the end of last season, there's a lot of potential still there with these guys that they've played together for so long. So I think with those additions, they're in a pretty good spot, especially as they wait for Dewan to come back. So that's why I kind of think you target running back, wide receiver, especially as we await, kind of what happens with Nick Chubb. That's still, he's an unrestricted free agent. So really at any time, he could be back or he could be going somewhere else.
I like him back.
I
would
love
wall
him
over
back.
there.
I
Let's
love
go.
that. I
Bring him
love
back.
Nick.
Let's get him back in the building.
But, that's still a possibility of you don't know how that's going to turn out. And at the time, right now, it's just Jerome and Pierre Strong. So you kind of need some depth there. Wide receiver, you're led by Jerry Jeudy and you have a ton of young guys who have really showcased their potential, but there's still, room there for that second guy to really step up. And so is it a young guy that you bring in one of that second, third round, et cetera? Defensively, I think you target safety. I think with Rodney retiring, you kind of have this hole left.
You have two safeties, really.
Yeah, exactly. And so you need somebody there, even if they're a young guy, but that brings in the depth piece that then they can grow. They can learn from somebody like Grant, who's been around. He can kind of find his footing and establish that role. But, Grant's obviously stepping up into that veteran role, especially now, because that was Rodney's role, obviously, last year. But now it's very much Grant's. And so he steps into that, and then Ronnie can step up, but that's basically your two. And so you need somebody else to fill that depth piece. So defensively, I think that's where they go, or seems a good place to go, especially because of who they added in free agency. Malik Collins on the interior, Joe on the edge. He was obviously a linebacker before, but now in this kind of system, he can play on that edge, and I think that's going to be a really good role for him. They both were super excited about the opportunity to play in this attack-style defense and that their skill sets are really apt for that type of defense. And so I think they'll be good pieces, which then kind of leaves the door open to kind of go other directions in the draft because you have kind of a core here to add to the defensive line guys that have already here. Shelby Harris, Miles, obviously, even the young guys. And so you have a really good, solid core at the moment that I think leaves the door open to go other places.
Yeah, and I think that's there are a lot of needs. You have a lot of draft picks. I would like a lot of the 6th and 7th round picks to move up so
Same.
We're not here till midnight on Saturday. That's a selfish reason. But you take a look, you mentioned it. In addition to the quarterbacks, you need 1 or 2 running backs. You'd probably need 1 or 2 wide receivers. You need 1 or 2 tight ends. Mm-hmm. You need some more depth at tackle. You need maybe another center. And maybe that's a late free agent acquisition. I still think defensive tackle.
Yeah.
I don't know what Mike Hall's status is. Mm-hmm. Coming off of that injury at the end of the season in that last game in Baltimore. The edge rusher room, I think I like where we're at. Linebacker with the acquisition of Baker, I think helps, but maybe you go get another young guy, especially because you've got a lot of linebackers that are on 1-year deals, and you need someone that you can build with. At corner, I like the depth already that you have, and as you mentioned, safety I think is a big deal. I did want to get a thought. You mentioned both of them, but 2 cornerstones of this franchise. We haven't had you on to get your reaction, but with Bitonio back, with Myles Garrett back, 2 guys, and Myles was under contract, and he wasn't going anywhere. This organization made it clear he wasn't going anywhere. Renegotiated his contract, and I think for 48 hours he was the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. It might have been 48 hours, but
didn't last that long.
he's one of the top, and rightfully so. But Myles being here and wanting to be here, and then Joel Bitonio coming back from a leadership standpoint, I don't think it can be taken lightly to have both those guys back in the building.
I think it's super important. I think Joel's step was really important for him, to work through just kind of the frustrations from the 2024 season and take a step back and think about what his future looked like. But him being back from the offensive side of the ball, and then Myles being back on the defensive side of the ball, you have these 2 franchise players that really do mean a lot to this organization, and their buy-in and their want to be here next season, and plus obviously for Garrett, and we'll see what happens with Joel, is such an important buy-in piece that the younger guys need. You need those guys that are they're going to rally behind Joel. They'll rally behind Miles of, okay, you have this veteran guy who's played X many seasons, has done so much in their careers, and they want to be here because they believe in this future. And so I think that was really important. I think it's a good thing for both sides of the ball, and you just need both those guys in that conversation. But yeah, I am happy to see them both back. I think it'll be a really good thing for any young guys they bring in, but also just for the overall morale of that locker room.
All right, you host the Backstage Pass series on our social media platforms, our website, clevelandbrowns.com, youtube.com/Browns. Is there a takeaway from any of the Backstage Pass interviews here this offseason with a lot of the additions? I had a conversation with Andrew Siciliano about this on this week's edition of the Best Podcast Available. I said, a year ago on this time, the last week in March was a busy week. We had a lot of signings. We had a lot of people through the building. It's been quiet.
Yeah.
And I think it's quiet throughout the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's something that I didn't see coming, and I don't think a lot of people did. There doesn't seem to be a lot happening. But of the guys we brought in, Kenny Pickett, Cornelius Lucas, Tryon Shoyinka, Malik Collins, entertaining. Might want to have the dump button ready. Jerome Baker, DeAndre Carter. Is there a takeaway? Is there one that stood out for you?
In the football side of the conversation, I'd say Malik. It was a really good conversation because he's played in attack-style defenses. It's basically all he's done his whole career. He played for Jacques, and so he was really excited about that opportunity to come back. He's played alongside Obo, so that familiarity piece for him was super important. And he talked about wanting to be here and feeling wanted and feeling very excited about that. So I liked that aspect, and wanting to play in this kind of style of defense and feeling that he can really contribute because he's developed his game and kind of developed a reputation as somebody who fits in this type of style. So I liked that a lot. On the non-football side, there was a couple things that I loved. Joe said that he loves to hike. So we talked a lot about, CVMP around here and the trails and the metro parks and stuff. Cornelius Lucas wants to bring his swim camps to Cleveland. So he talked about, he does them in New Orleans, but he wants to bring them here as just, a lot of players do football camps and everything, but he took a different direction and went swim camps to help teach young boys how to swim. And so they had that knowledge. So I thought that was really cool and very different. And then one of our own guys that's back, but Devin Bush was talking about how he knows how to juggle, and he taught himself how to juggle, and it's not something a lot of the guys know, but he has done it. But
he's not a rookie, so he didn't do it during the rookie talent show.
Exactly. So it was an unknown skill set of his.
I think we need a veteran talent show.
I think so too.
So it has been a busy off season. There's still a lot to go, and we'll wait and see what happens over the next 4 weeks and beyond. Players are back in the building in about 3 weeks, so right before the draft, and we'll see what happens with this organization as we go. As I mentioned, coming up at 1:40, Tyvis Powell and Gerard Cherry will join the program. Up next, Austin Ward from 97.1 The Fan in Columbus, recapping Ohio State's Pro Day, talking about the 17 Ohio State players that are coming out in the draft. She's a Georgia alum. She couldn't be more excited about this right now. And Austin Ward will join us when we come back. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily, presented by Ballybet, a sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Elk and Elk Serious Lawyers for serious injuries. Call 1-800-ELK Ohio for your free case review. Elk and Elk, a proud partner of your Cleveland Browns. I do know how to talk. My name's Jason Gibbs. She is senior staff writer Kelsey Russo from clevelandbrowns.com. And this is Cleveland Browns Daily, presented by Bally Bet. We go now to the Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea Hotline, an official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. Talking a little Buckeyes with our great friend of the program, Austin Ward from the podcast on 97.1 The Fan. Hey, Ward, how the heck are you, buddy?
Great. Always great to be with you guys. Feels like we timed this one up pretty regularly right after Ohio State Pro Day, which was another great showcase for those Buckeyes on Wednesday at the Woody.
Definitely a great day indeed, and you're also in the middle of spring ball too because you don't have enough going on. You know, very little time
right.
to celebrate a national championship, but 17 Buckeyes at Ohio State's Pro Day yesterday. All of them showed up and showed out, and as I like to say, I don't think you can hurt yourself more than you can help yourself at a Pro Day, but I feel like Ohio State players may have actually debunk that myth and actually help themselves. There are a number of them with really great days yesterday.
Yeah, just some jaw-dropping numbers coming out of the testing. And, you know, not everybody does everything. You pick and choose the spots that you might need to improve from the combine or what you didn't do at the combine. And some of these guys didn't have a ton of, you know, really room to move up. But if you see someone like Ty Hamilton, who was overlooked even as the defensive tackle for Ohio State, kind of overshadowed by not just JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer on the edge, but Tyleik Williams next to him, a defensive tackle. He puts up 34 reps on the bench press. He looked like $1 million and might earn a contract somewhere along those lines after the way he worked out. Really, you know, look at his older brother, Devon Hamilton's been grinding out a career in the NFL level for several years. He's got the genetics. He worked out great. I think that will get people's attention. You had Jordan Hancock, you know, posting, you know, one of the best 40 times, one of the best vertical jumps that anybody among the defensive backs would have posted in Indianapolis. He's someone who definitely, I think, is going to get more attention because he can play both cornerback and safety at the NFL level, depending on what you need. So I think he helped himself. Emeka Egbuka, I think, you know, he has certainly been, whether it was 2 years ago, someone in the shadow of Marvin Harrison Jr. and then Jeremiah Smith a year ago. Anyone who's watched the film and the productivity of Emeka Egbuka over 4 years knows what kind of player he can be, and his measurables met that moment on Wednesday as well. So you're absolutely right. I didn't even get into what Will Howard, if he needed to prove some people about his accuracy. There was some criticism from a couple throws at the combine. Amazing what happens when you get to throw to some receivers you know and some really talented guys. I thought he was awesome on Wednesday. He missed maybe one throw, another was dropped, but you know, he's got a lot of film of high-level football and 4 playoff games that I think people can refer to as well. Those guys, I think, Jason, would be at the top of that list. And but it was fun to be out there because it's rare that you would have a pro day where whatever position you're looking for, Ohio State has somebody out there to do it.
Austin, kind of going off that, and this is Kelsey Russo. I'm our senior staff writer, but I was kind of curious more so about Will and coming off the combine. You know, these teams are taking into so much consideration the combine, their interviews, their pro days, etc. But what more so do you think he showcased in that throwing session that really just maybe solidified his tape and, you know, kind of putting everything into perspective for him?
Yeah, I think he was – Will Howard does not hide his emotions very well, and I think that's part of what made him great and a perfect fit as a leader for Ohio State last year. So he was annoyed, I think, by the way he was being picked apart, which comes with the territory, not just because he's used to that from being a quarterback at Ohio State, winning a national championship, but he knows that when you're going on to the next level and you want to be an NFL quarterback, that business side, they're going to pick apart any little thing. They're making $1 million decisions and trying to build, you know, franchises around this position. So he knows that that's part of the deal, but I think that, you know, he made the choice to throw, and not everybody does that at the combine. And, you know, you sit around, you don't just get an opportunity to get into a rhythm. You don't necessarily have a script of things that you're going to work on and show off. And that can be a difficult spot. That's why some of these quarterbacks opt out of that in Indianapolis. So I do think that he took that challenge, you know, whether that's took it personally or just understood the gravity of the situation on Wednesday, that he wanted to be extremely well prepared for that. He wanted to make sure that they had a good script, that he knew all the throws that he was going to need to show off, deep throws, intermediate throws, short throws. There's examples of all of that on his film at Ohio State, but, you get into this next phase of the process where, you're splitting hairs and you're looking for an excuse to draft or not draft somebody. I don't think you could watch what Will Howard did with the accuracy, with the way he, sometimes people talk about the command of the script and pointing things out to receivers on pro day, and that I think can be overblown compared to what you did in college. And it wasn't just 16 games at Ohio State for him, and several years of starting experience at Kansas State before that. I think people know he can do that, but you watched some of the coaches and general managers that were there. They were really impressed. They were talking about it. They were clapping during the workout. The throws were on the money. It didn't really surprise me. That was what I expected to see from Will Howard on a day where he got to go back out there with, Emeka, Egbuka, and Carnell Tate, and Brandon Ennis, and Travion Henderson, guys that he's known, and worked with plenty. They had a good rapport, and just about every ball was right where it needed to be.
Talking with Austin Ward, Ohio State Buckeye reporter, member of the podcast at 97.1 The Fan, wherever you get your podcasts. The running back position, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. How do we separate the two? And who, if you have to guess, who goes first? Who's the first one off the board in the NFL draft 4 weeks from now?
Boy, you flip a coin and you win either way, honestly. I mean, I think both of these guys, they have so much that they bring to the table. The thing that I think separates Quinshon is a little bit more of the physicality. Now, he's got speed. He can certainly get to the next level, but it is the stiff arm, the willingness to break, the ability to break tackles that I think sets him apart. And Travion, it's not that he can't do that. Both of these guys have every tool you could want from a running back. And I think that's what, elevated the Buckeyes down the stretch, was that they didn't have to just say, well, if Travion is in the game, this is what's going to happen. They're only going to throw screens to him. They're only going to use him on the perimeter. Travion he got so good throughout his career about picking up blitzes. And sometimes he was too physical with that, and he would hurt himself. And as he learned to navigate through that and got more mature in the way he needed to approach the game and use his body, he gave you everything you wanted. And Quinshon could do that too. And I think that to separate them, I think would almost be impossible for me. I think Quinshon's got maybe a little bit more mileage on the tires because he was so, in my opinion, overworked at Ole Miss. I mean, you're talking about 600 touches at that level. Part of the appeal for him to come to Ohio State last year was that he could form a 1-2 tandem with Travion Henderson, and that neither one of them would have to take 400 carries or 400 touches in the Ohio State offense. And the Buckeyes did a really good job, I think, of managing that throughout the season so that they were playing their best in those last 4 or 5 games, which they did. And Travion, I think, is someone who, when he got to Ohio State, it was more about just the raw athleticism and track star speed, but he hadn't played, he didn't play his last year of high school. Sometimes we forget about these stories coming out of the end of COVID. He hadn't played a ton of football, and you could see him getting better and better throughout his career at Ohio State. So I think that maybe as NFL talent evaluators, and I see some of these mock drafts, and I'll defer to the experts of where they slot, how much value to put on them. I think some of the ones that I've seen elevating Travion, I'm guessing that is more to do with people expecting that there's more football ahead of Travion Henderson and that maybe his best football still could be ahead of him. I think that could also be a little bit unfair to Quinshon because, it wasn't his fault that he was being asked to do that for an SEC team and doing it at a really high level. But I would take either one of them in a heartbeat. You're not going to have any issues off the field with them. You're not going to have any question about the work ethic. And I don't think there are any holes in their game. They are both complete running backs.
I saw a ton of clips yesterday of Emeka's day at the Pro Bowl or Pro Day, and when you talk about just what he brings to the game, what do you think he showcased even more so at this Pro Day that then maybe just helped secure where he is in this draft?
Yeah, I think we get sometimes spoiled by getting to watch every snap of these guys, and I think that a few of the catches that he made over the shoulder at full speed, I hope and I think and I expect that people left on Wednesday with a really great appreciation for the hand-eye coordination and the ball skills of Emeka, because they're off the charts. And there's nothing. We have a series that we do on the podcast where we play 9 holes of golf in a simulator with these guys. And Emeka, he's a great baseball player. He's a great golfer. I don't know that there's anything that he doesn't do at a very high level. And sometimes, I mentioned Marvin Harrison a couple of years ago and Jeremiah Smith bursting to prominence. I think sometimes that reliability, that consistency, sometimes gets mistaken for and diminishes how high level it is and how elite what Emeka is doing at a really reliable, consistent level. So doing that again, I'm not sure that he had to do it on Wednesday. I bet the thing that people are going to latch on to, and I know that it was important to him as soon as he ran it, was the 40-yard dash time. Comes down for these wide receivers. That's you're looking at every last part of their game and trying to differentiate between guys who've been very productive at not just Ohio State, but LSU or anywhere else across the country. There's lots of really good wide receivers. But Ohio State has been churning them out. He knows how to be a professional. His work ethic is one of the best that I've ever been around. He's another one of these guys where it'll sound like, lip service or cliche. I mean, you're not going to ever have a concern that Emeka is not going to show up on time or represent your organization the right way. And then when you add on top of that the productivity and stopping the clock the way he did in the 40 and running the shuttle and all those other things, there's just not a box that you can't check with Emeka Egbuka. And, I don't want it to sound like gushing just because this is the team that I cover. These are the guys that I know. But part of the reason that they won the national championship was because you had leaders like Travion and because you had Emeka Egbuka out there and you had Will Howard. These are really, really good people. And I think the interview portion that you mentioned as well, and you're talking about Will Howard, that's going to separate these guys. And they're people that I think organizations won't regret using a draft pick on somebody that contributed to this national championship run at Ohio State.
Austin, as long as Egbuka, if he doesn't go to us, doesn't go to someone in the AFC North, I'm going to be really, really happy with that. You
don't want to see him on Pittsburgh and Baltimore.
No, Austin, no.
Absolutely not.
Every mock draft, I tell my intern and I tell him all the time, No, we're not addressing that. That's not happening. We're not going to speak that into existence. We're speaking everything else into existence except that. Austin Ward joins us, the member of the podcast on 97.1 The Fan. We've talked offense, defensively. I mean, you got Jack Sawyer, Tyleik Williams. I know went down yesterday, but I think he's going to be okay. Tuamalu, perfect. Ransom, Denzel Burke, Cody Simon. I mean, these guys that maybe you're not going to hear on day one, and maybe you get a couple of them on day two, but maybe more so day three. But don't go to sleep on this defensive class coming out here for the Buckeyes.
Oh, gosh, yeah, absolutely not. And I think the name you mentioned there with Denzel, if people turned the tape off after the Oregon game, which was difficult for a lot of people, the mid-season Oregon game, not the Rose Bowl game.
Right.
You could turn that one off early, but for a different reason. Ohio State's defense, that was the only time all year that they got picked on, and Denzel had the roughest day out of all of them in coverage. But some of it was a lack of pass rush, and they didn't get home. So everybody, I think you take the front, Jack, JT, Ty up front, Cody Simon, they all bore some responsibility for that. Denzel took more criticism than any of them. He owned that. He was phenomenal, lights out, lockdown for the rest of the year. He came back for one more season at Ohio State. His goal was to be the first cornerback taken in the draft. I don't think that's going to happen next month. But he's certainly in the conversation. And if you wind up getting him as the third or fourth corner, I think that would be like stealing, in my opinion, because you're going to take the worst moments from anybody, and you're going to ask why that happened, and how did you learn from that? How did you adapt? If you turn on, the next 10 games from Denzel Burke after that, you saw one of the best cornerbacks in America playing at a really high level, and teams were not having success. They were not throwing to wide receivers down the stretch against Ohio State's defense. And part of that is Denzel. Part of that is Jordan Hancock there with his work at nickel that I mentioned earlier. His testing was also great. And having Lathan Ransom, he's another one that just sort of slips through the cracks. So much talk about Caleb Downs and what the conversation is going to be like for him as a draft pick at this time next year. It was the partnership between Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs that helped elevate that defense to another level where you had safeties where you could move them and ask them to do anything, free safety, strong safety, play in the box. defend a tight end. They could do anything that Ohio State needed them to do, and that NFL talent evaluators would want them to do. They checked all those boxes. Cody Simon, he's the block O. He was the captain, as you sort of look at it, for Ohio State. He's another one that I mentioned that goes in this same box. But if you just narrow it down to his leadership skills, you would be ignoring the fact that every time Ohio State played a ranked opponent, every time they played a playoff game, you could count on him for double-digit tackles and a pass breakup and a tackle for loss or two. He is a very productive linebacker that, focusing just on the intangible part and the captaincy, would be ignoring what I think are all the tools that you would want from an NFL linebacker who could play for a long time. So when you say don't sleep on it, yeah, you're absolutely right. It may not be 5 or 6 guys going in the first round, but there's going to be 7 or 8 of them that go by the time the fourth round happens. And if you're going to stash them away and develop them, or you want to try and plug them in by day one in training camp or whatever, I think all these guys can do it. And they played a lot of football. They came back for another year with a goal to. Some of it was, to try and win the rivalry game. That didn't happen. Elevate their draft stock. I think that absolutely happened. And win a national championship. They did that too. So they're veterans. They're mature guys, and they're not going to need a lot of, training wheels once they get into that NFL franchise.
Austin Ward, appreciate a few minutes of your time. I know you're a very, very busy man. Don't take any flack from our guys Bishop and Powell down there. Whatever you do, keep them on their toes, keep them going, keep them honest. And I look forward to talking with you a little bit more here as we get closer to the draft and obviously the upcoming season where the Buckeyes defend that national championship. Appreciate a few minutes today, my friend.
Sure. Happy to do it. Great to catch up with both of you. See ya.
Absolutely. Austin Ward from the podcast on 97.1 The Fan. You got a few minutes?
Yeah, I'm good.
We're sticking around. G-Man, are you ready? You ready? This is going to be an electric segment coming up. In my mind, it's electric. I don't know if it's going to be or not. No dump button needed. Well, at least I jinxed us, but good. Gerard Cherry and Tyvis Powell join us next. We play Fact or Fiction, the award-winning episode, or edition, I should say, from our pregame show. The two join us next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily, presented by Bally Bet, an official sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns on 850 ESPN Cleveland.
Because at the combine, I embarrassed myself, the university, anyone who said they ran track in college. I came back and ran a 4.3 something in the 40. So, yeah.
There you go.
I had to get that off my chest. So that's what I did very well there. And the drills went well, too. But I will say with an individual workout, guys, Tom Coughlin and Randy Edsel worked me out. And I did not know Randy Edsel played quarterback on the D1 level. But I found out that day. I dropped every pass that he could.
That's why you were a DB.
Yeah, you're DB. You're DB for a reason.
Well, you making us look bad. I made it my mission to catch every ball. I didn't drop no money that day.
I dropped thousands of dollars that day.
All right. That being said, it is time for Fact or Fiction. It's Kelsey, it's Tyvis, it's Gerard, it's yours truly, and I welcome in the G-Man.
All right, let's jump right in. Fact or Fiction, the Browns will select a quarterback with the number 2 overall pick.
Tyvis Powell will kick things off with you.
I'm gonna say that's a fact. I do think that they might trade up to 1 to get Cam Ward, but if they don't, I can see them definitely taking Shador at number 2. I think the Giants kind of feel that way too. That's why they signed 2 different quarterbacks. So I think the Browns will take somebody either 1 or 2 at a quarterback.
Gerard Cherry, what say you?
Fiction.
Oh,
And it's really simple. Why? Jim Schwartz went to Andrew Berry and company and said, you know what? Give me Abdul Carter, and you know what's going to take place? He and Miles together, you imagine the defenses I could come up with. We don't have to worry about scoring points because nobody's going to score. So I'm going to say fiction. They're going to take Abdul Carter.
Gerard Cherry, you're lucky Bo Bishop and Nathan Zagura aren't here. They'd be jumping down your throat right now for saying this blasphemy, according to them. Kelsey Russo, what say you?
I'm going to say fact. I think that the Browns also go the direction of taking a quarterback, and whether that's Cam, they trade up, kind of like Tyvis said, or they take Shador, I think that's the route they're going to go at 2.
All right. So Kelsey and Tyvis are going to the barbecue, and Gerard's on the outside working on his 40 time. Or catching footballs. Next.
Or lack thereof.
The G-Man from the top. Gerard, the intern's taking shots at you.
Hey,
He better hope he ain't around in a couple months.
Gerard has more Super Bowls than I have.
Where do you want to go?
Whatever. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, fact or fiction, the biggest position of need for the Browns outside of quarterback is offensive tackle.
Gerard Cherry.
That is a great question. I'm going to say fact on that because we haven't really talked about it. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Big Thanos and what DeJuan Jones represents. But at the same time, he does have some issues with injuries, and he's going to have to recover from that. And we have not made mention at all of a tackle or a guard or a center or anything of that nature because, simply put, it's not as sexy as a quarterback or a rush in.
Kelsey.
I'm going to say fiction, and as we talked about earlier on this, I think the biggest position of need is running back or wide receiver outside of quarterback on the offensive side of the ball.
Tyvis?
I'm going to say fiction as well. I'm going to agree with Kelsey. I'm going to say running back because if you think about they want to get back to the old Kevin Stefanski style. And what do you need for that to be successful? A good run game, and that's the one thing that was missing last year. So I'm going to go running back.
Do you guys want to see Nick Chubb come back like the rest of us do here in this building?
Heck yeah. I don't want to see him in a Steelers uniform, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that even if you want him, if you don't even want him to be your 1A, I think as a 1B or if you draft a young guy, that's a guy that you probably want them to look up to, to teach them how to be a pro in the NFL. So I think it's just so many other things that Nick Chubb can bring to this organization than just what's on the field.
Yeah, give him the Kareem Hunt role. Nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Next.
Fact or fiction? Okay, I wanted to do that. Speaking of running backs, fact or fiction, one of Ohio State's running backs, either Judkins or Henderson, will be a Brown following the draft.
Now, I was going to go in order. I should go Kelsey first, but Captain Buckeye down there, I think, has to go first here. Tyvis, what say you?
As much as I would love for this to be a fact, I'm gonna say fiction. I think that I just wait. Hear me out now. Can I finish? Good night. Look, the reason that I think that they won't get him is because I think they'll go before the Browns try to get him. I think that if the Browns take him at 33, then they would have one. But I don't think that they're going to do that because this running back room is so deep. I think that they're going to try to address another need somewhere else and then try to get one in the third round. And I just think those two guys will probably be gone by then.
Kelsey.
I kind of agree with that line of thinking. I was going to say fiction of, I think, those guys have jumped. They've improved their draft stock, so I don't think they're going to be available, and I think there's going to be other needs that the Browns use at 33 before they kind of address that running back position.
Gerard Cherry.
Yeah, it's a trifecta because I'm going to say fiction as well, but my rationale is much different in that I just see these guys more so in that third down back category, and we kind of have that on the roster already, so to speak, and that we're going to go with more of that guy who can be on the football field for all the downs. And granted, their skill set shows that they are capable of being on the football field multiple downs, but I just think that they don't fit what we want to do from a size and position standpoint with the running back position.
Next.
Okay, next. Fact or fiction, the Seattle Seahawks are better with Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp than they were with Geno Smith and DK Metcalf.
I will start with Kelsey here. Fact or fiction?
Gabe, this is so hard. I am going to say fiction.
That's right.
But
Gerard likes it.
but not to discount that I don't think they will be so good together, and I think there is an opportunity for some awesome offense on that, like with that group together. But I just think the combination of Geno and DK was just so good and had their years there where they looked really good together. But we'll see what happens with Sam and Cooper, but I don't think you can top it.
Tyvis Powell.
I'm going to say fact. I'm going to say they are better with those two for the simple fact that you got guys that's going to fit the system or the style of play that you want to run in Seattle. You got a two-headed monster in the run game. So what do you want to do off of that? You want to run play action off of those things. And obviously Sam Darnold coming from Kevin O'Connell, he runs that similar type of thing where a lot of things is set up off of boots and all those. And I think Cooper Kupp, obviously he won't be the number one JSN to be there, go Bucks, but I think he will be very productive in that slot. I think he still got some stuff left to him. So I think those guys will be productive in that offense because of the style of play in which they both come from, where both of them came from that under center, heavy zone, play action type system.
Gerard Cherry.
Now, when you first posed this question, Gabe, I was like, this is simplistic. It's not that hard. But after hearing the rationale of my two colleagues here, I have to reconsider what I was thinking. But you know what? I'm still going to stay with fiction. The reason why I'm still staying with fiction is I don't trust Sam Darnold. I believe that he eventually came back to who he
Wait, you trust Geno?
More so than Sam. At least Geno did it a couple years. True?
No.
It is true. With that being said, again, DK, he is a malcontent. We understand and get that. Cooper Kupp is not going to give you any issues or problems whatsoever, and I still think there's some gas left in his tank. But Sam, I'm not trusting, and on a lot of levels, I'm trying to figure out what the heck Seattle is actually doing. But I do think Geno and DK is going to be something that they're not going to be able to top. So I'm going to say, again, fiction.
Did I get to everybody?
Yeah.
I lost track.
Yes, sir.
Next. Sorry, I'm going through my list here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Seattle does because right now they have two slot receivers. So, need a deep threat. Fact or fiction, following free agency, the Baltimore Ravens have the best roster in the National Football League.
Gerard Cherry, we'll start with you.
I'm not going to say they have the best roster in the National Football League. The Philadelphia Eagles have the best roster in the National Football League by far. They won the Super Bowl for a reason. And the Ravens sign a couple guys and do what they do, but no, they don't have the best roster in the National Football League. It's simply put, the Eagles.
Tyvis Powell.
I have to agree with my cousin on this.
Oh, we're back to the barbecue.
We've been going at it this whole time, but this one he's on the money. I mean, listen, the Eagles did everything the correct way. They depend on a lot of young guys. I know they lost Darius Slay, but guess what? They drafted really well. Right. They lost the defensive tackle, but guess what? They drafted really well in those positions. So when you look at it from top to bottom, their starting 22 is still good. And, I mean, they're coming off of a Super Bowl win, which is something Baltimore has not done in quite some time.
Kelsey.
I will also round out the trifecta and agree with fiction, but I do think the Ravens moves obviously were really, really good. So I'm, as a division rival, a little worried now, even more so than I have been in past years. But I don't think you can top the Eagles at this point with what they came off of last season.
I am still shocked that the Bengals were able to retain all of their people.
Did they really, Jay?
Well, I mean, I don't know who's going to play defense. Gerard, you and Tyvis both might have to come out of retirement. Which
I signed up for
a paycheck.
T. Higgins.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I would point shave against the Browns. I'd just let them score.
I'd be like, does this add another year to my pension? We're good. What do I sign?
Next.
Oh, goodness. All right, fact or fiction? Aaron Rodgers will retire rather than sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Kelsey, you lead us off here. No pressure.
Yeah. I'm going to say fiction. I think he still obviously wants to play, and I think he's going to take any opportunity that he can. And if that's in a Steelers jersey, so help us. But I don't think he's going to hang it up. I don't think he wants to hang it up anytime soon, so I think he's going to find whatever opportunity is out there.
Tyvis Powell.
Yeah, I think he's going to play. I think that ultimately they're doing this song and dance, but Pittsburgh is probably the best place for him, and it gives him the best chance to be successful this season. So I think that they ultimately are going to go with Aaron Rodgers.
Gerard Cherry.
I mean, when you're used to everyone telling you what you want to hear and getting what you need, it's hard to give that up. And it's also hard giving up the celebrity that he has as a celebrity quarterback. He is not looking to lose that limelight anytime soon, ladies and gentlemen. So fiction. He will, if it doesn't even have to be a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, he will just keep the idea out there. So every time he turns on SportsCenter, we hear his name being mentioned. So fiction.
Final one.
I want all the passion that you have in this question. Fact or fiction? Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time, not LeBron James.
Like Stephen A. said this morning. Gerard, what say you?
I'm so torn on this.
Oh, come on. There's no torn. Jordan's the best.
And the reason why I'm torn is that what LeBron is doing to going on Pat McAfee's show is petty. What Stephen A. is doing is petty. And if they had a one-on-one competition, I'm thinking LeBron's going to beat him in the game. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure of it. It's the strength factor, the speed factor, and all those things. So I'm going to have to say fiction on that.
Tyvis Powell, what say you?
He overthinking it. Michael Jordan is the GOAT. I respect what LeBron has done. He probably has every record, but what Mike did and how he changed the game and going 6-0 in the finals.
Wizards Mike, LeBron's Lakers. Wizards Mike, LeBron Lakers.
I'm sorry. It's just what it is. And on top of that, when I look down at my feet, guess what I see? Jordan.
All I know is
marketing.
LeBron's got as many finals losses as Jordan has wins. That's all you need to know. Kelsey,
who has more points, more assists?
He's played 22 years to 13.
And still balling. He's playing like Jordan was playing in his prime at 40.
See, this is the problem. This is a debate that happens a lot for me. So I'm going to hear about this one way or the other, whatever I choose. But I think I'm going to go fact with Jordan being the GOAT. Because you think of the championships, you think of what he did in a shorter period of time. The way that the game was back then is so different than it was now. The game now has evolved where it's so offensive heavy versus what it was when Jordan played, and I think that really creates the difference. I think, yes, this in this modern age of the NBA, LeBron owns that, no doubt about that, but I think when you compare the two, Jordan wins out.
Tyvis Powell, Gerard Cherry, it's an honor and a pleasure. And I can't wait to see both of you. Oh, you know what? Run him. Kick him out. No. You know what? I will call you at 1 o'clock in the morning when that final goes. I hate you,
It was
but
nice
I love
talking
you.
I'll be watching if they're winning. That being Arizona.
It was nice. It was nice to talk to my cousin again, even though he's wild at times and says outlandish things.
Hey, man.
We all have relatives
The
like
meds didn't
that.
work today.
TP, Gerard, thank you very much. We will talk to you guys coming up in a few weeks with our draft coverage coming up. Kelsey, appreciate all of your time here today.
Of course. Thank you
Thanks
for
for
having me
sitting
on.
in for the hour.
Yeah.
Bo Bishop, Nathan Zagura, whatever. Zagura actually goes one-on-one. We've been holding it since the Combine, and you are not going to want to miss it. We've got some big stuff coming, really big stuff. Right, G-Man?
Some people say it's the biggest.
We've saved the best interview from the Combine for last. You will hear that in hour 2 on Cleveland Browns Daily, presented by Bally Bet, an official sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Thank Kelsey Russo for joining us. Want to thank Tyvis Powell, Gerard Cherry, and Austin Ward for their time as well. I mentioned it before we went to break. There is one combine interview we have not given you so far in 2025. We've been holding it, waiting for that right time, right day, maybe a day that both guys are off, and we have an hour. And, well, every time Nathan sits down with this fine human being, it's at least a good 30 to 35-minute interview. It is in-depth. It's on the quarterbacks. It's on the quarterback class, not just the first-round guys, but guys on day 2, guys on day 3, and what NFL people are looking for in quarterbacks. Here is part 1 of 3 this hour. Nathan Zagura with the executive producer and analyst for NFL Matchup and NFL Films, the legendary Greg Cosell.
What an absolute
You're done.
part of the Combine, the yearly interview with Greg Cosell from NFL
You
Films.
must have had a slow day.
No, well, listen, I'm still riding high after yesterday where I got to hang out with you and Charles Davis
That
and
was
just
fun.
listen.
That was a great conversation.
It was awesome.
That was a great conversation.
I said after that, I think I should leave. I don't think the Combine's going to get any better for me.
That was awesome.
It was fun. Well, this is going to be awesome, too, and it is great to see you again. When you come here, and I know that those are the interactions certainly that I love to have, what do you like the most about being here?
Just to see you. That's it. After that, I could leave after this, and I'm good to go.
Me too.
Yeah.
It works out. It's a mutual admiration society.
Well, it's funny. I mean, all kidding aside, the conversation you mentioned yesterday, those are the things I love about the Combine. You get to have these impromptu conversations. I get to go out for breakfast or lunch with scouts, coaches. This is what I really love because, I just love talking ball, and I love learning. I love hearing things that resonate. I watch a ton of tape, and obviously I've been doing it for years and years. But then you hear, whether it's, Charles Davis or a scout or a coach say something in a way that just resonates differently, even though you know what they're saying, and you go, oh, yeah, but it just hits you in a different way. And you'll learn something. And then when I go back and watch tape, I feel like my mind has expanded a little bit. And, I've always been intellectually curious. I love to read books. So that to me is the joy of the Combine. And everybody's relaxed because no coach has a game Sunday. No one is uptight, So you just have, I had an impromptu conversation with a defensive coordinator. I had lunch with a really good friend of mine today who's a scout. And then we're walking back and we see a D coordinator that he knew and introduced me. And we ended up talking for 25 minutes just about conceptual football. That's the kind of stuff you can't put a price tag on that.
I agree. I think that is the best part of it. You call it talking ball. I like to listen ball.
Right,
so I
right.
Like to listen to
well,
ball
I'm
when
listening
you guys are
mostly
talking.
too. Because that's the way I learn. You listen.
No,
but
course.
having those conversations, to me, they're the best.
And I've learned, and I'm saying this is not kidding. I've learned more from you and just over the years just trying to glean information about how to understand football. When you said earlier, I watch a lot of tape, I would like the people who are listening and watch this program to understand what that really means. Will you let them know? Take them through a film week in the life of Greg Cosell.
Well, basically, obviously the NFL season, I'm basically grinding tape all day Monday, all day Tuesday. Obviously, I have to do work for my NFL Matchup show, which, I created in the 80s, produced for years, and now have been on it as an analyst for 7 or 8 years.
Good.
But then once that work is done, and we normally shoot that show on a Friday. But then when that work's done, I just go back to watching as much tape as I can throughout the course of a week. I can't get through every game, particularly when there's 16 games, but I get through as much as I possibly can. I probably take 35 typewritten pages of notes every week.
On the National Football League?
Yes.
And what are you, when you're doing that, are you looking more for league concepts, league trends, schematic football, or is it or players?
It's a combination of both. I would say I've evolved when it comes to the NFL, mostly in terms of tactics and schematics.
Okay.
Like, if I get a call from a writer saying, hey, I'm doing my all-pro team, who are the best left guards in the league? I'm probably not going to be able to answer that in a great way. I'm not studying it like that. Obviously, if I'm looking at a team and they have a high draft choice at a certain position, maybe I'm taking a little more of a more detailed look at that guy just because of who he is.
Sure.
But, I can't study in detail, 5 offensive linemen.
Right,
of
course.
I can't. But So I do that every single week. I work on weekends. I probably work 70, 75 hours a week. And then mid-January, once there's fewer NFL games, that's when I really start hitting the college players. That has a different intellectual feel to it, because even though you have to have some sense of schematics, then I'm a little more focused on individuals and what their traits, attributes, characteristics are. But you still have to think about it in terms of their projection and transition to the league. You're not evaluating college players in a vacuum. You know, you have to think about, okay, and since I don't work for a team, I don't have a mandate from, let's say, a scouting director saying, hey, here's the kind of player we want. Right. So I have to think in terms of, okay, I'm watching a defensive tackle. What kind of player is he? Is he a power player? Is he a quickness player? You know, what teams, you know, rely more on, they want their players, you know, with what they do with their fronts to be power players. What teams, you know, look maybe more for quickness. You know, sure. I try to think like that. Yep. You know, so that changes sort of my intellectual approach and academic approach, and I really like that.
How much in the NFL portion of it, you're talking schematics, and I could be like, oh, look at how this team plays its quarters coverages.
Right,
oh, that's neat, and things like that. How much are you also kind of saying to kind of keep your learning going? You said you're intellectually curious, but, you know, this last year coming out of college, I thought this guy was this. Right. Now I'm actually seeing it here, so I could go back to my notes and be like, this is where I got this right, or maybe I'm really good at kind of identifying this, and here's where. I
find that I get guys wrong for two reasons. One, I'm just wrong. You know, I didn't evaluate him, you know, and I just made a misevaluation.
Sure.
Other times it can be wrong because I see a guy in my mind to be deployed in the NFL a certain way, and for whatever reason, whatever team he goes to, they don't deploy him in that way. And I think to myself, and again, no knock on coach. I mean, you know, it's still human beings evaluating human beings, you know. And in my mind, I think, God, I really thought that this guy could do this better and would fit better being used in that role. And that's not the way he's being deployed.
Right.
So, again, it doesn't make me smarter than coaches. I never ever rip coaches. I never ever am critical of coaches. Like, I get asked a lot, what do you think of the game plan? What do you think of the play calling? I don't answer those questions because I always say, you know what? You'd have to be there from Monday morning until Saturday night and know what the whole process is to even be able to make a comment about it, much less really say something meaningful about it.
Well, people believe they can make comments about anything.
Well, we know that.
Make an intelligent
right. We know that.
Yes.
I mean, you're in a situation where you probably get a chance to talk to the coaches because you're doing the games. So, and again, you're not getting every morsel of information, but you're being given enough so that you can speak intelligently when you're doing the games.
Understand what we're trying to attack and accomplish. In the
correct.
game.
Correct. Right. You know, but. You know, it's like when people ask me about a guy's character or leadership, I say, I can't answer that. You have to be there every day to know that.
Yep.
I can't answer that.
Yep.
You know, you got to be there every day.
Yeah.
I can't answer that from seeing a guy give an interview, a post-game interview or a Wednesday interview. I don't know that.
For sure. No.
Yeah.
No, that's one of those things. Right. And those are traits that's why they have these area scouts, and that's why you hopefully have familiarity and you can kind of flesh some of those things out. Let's talk quarterbacks for a second.
Sure.
I love hearing the way that you approach this position. One thing I wanted to ask you is I'll never forget talking to you about Patrick Mahomes of the 2017 draft. And you were what I think is
seems like that was about, eons ago.
It seems like it was decades ago.
Yeah.
But I remember you saying that you found him. You don't say, I think this guy's going to be great, or he's not. You watch the tape and you say, here are basically my findings. And I remember you saying at the time that Patrick Mahomes was, for you, kind of the hardest projection because we hadn't seen anybody play the game the way that he played the game.
Quite like that, correct.
When you think about that frame of mind now, how you've seen him actually play the game now, and I would say a variety of quarterbacks play a similar style game, how has your evaluation of that position changed? And I'm leading to, in 2017, I feel like you probably would have thought Cam Ward was maybe a tougher evaluation for you than he is today.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question, Nathan, because you have to evolve with the game. And I like to think I do that. I mean, I could be totally honest that 15 or 20 years ago, I was probably still caught up in 6'4", 225 pocket quarterback, and that's what you had to be. And then you see how the game changes. And it changes and evolves for many reasons. because don't forget, defenses change, and the quarterback position and offenses have to evolve as well. Sometimes offense fuels changes in defense. Sometimes defense fuels changes in offense. None of this is 100%. A lot of fans think this stuff's 100%. You made one thing you don't like about a guy. Oh, you hate him. It's
nuance.
That's never
There's
the way
a lot.
it is.
Yes.
So what we've seen over time in the NFL is defenses have become so much more skillful at pressuring the quarterback. More and more teams use second and third level players, particularly third level players, of which Steve Spagnuolo is a master, Todd Bowles is a master, as blitzers. So you end up with more speed rushing the quarterback. You end up with players coming from distance that offensive linemen don't necessarily see in their vision. So, the game has become faster on defense. So now there are more plays where the quarterback is under more duress. A lot of people would still argue that the biggest mismatch in the NFL is still pass rushers versus O-linemen. As good as O-linemen have gotten in terms of better athleticism than 15 or 20 or 25 years ago, we see that, when you're facing a Myles Garrett or just the great athletes as pass rushers, those guys are just better athletes than the offensive linemen.
Yep.
It's just the way it is.
Yep.
So now quarterbacks, yes, do we still believe that quarterbacks have to have some level of efficiency throwing from the pocket? Of course they do, because that's how the game is taught. They've got to be able to drop back, execute the way the offense is taught. But now the game is such that there are many more plays than ever before where the defense wins the early part of the down. And the quarterback has to have some kind of reactive mechanism, whether it's pocket movement, where he doesn't necessarily leave the pocket, but he's able to avoid, reset, and still deliver the ball, whether it's the ability to get outside the pocket and make a play. So now the trait that when you mentioned 2017 in Mahomes, and now we look at a Cam Ward, you think, okay, that has become a little more of an essential trait. If you can't do that, you have to be so good pre-snap and post-snap that you have to be just really, really good. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's really, particularly since younger quarterbacks don't grow up being taught the position that way anymore. Everything is pure progression. They're not really taught defense. All they're taught is, here's your primary, here's your secondary, here's your third. If you drop back and your primary's not open, hey, it doesn't matter why he's not open. Just look to the next guy. So they really don't know about defense.
Right.
All they know are the basics, like, is it single high or two shell? Might I get a blitz? Oh, I don't know. The center's going to figure that out. That's the way these guys are taught right now, to be totally honest. So, it's becoming harder and harder to just be a pure pocket player with no other real meaningful ability. You have to be so good at a really high level.
And you have to be so cerebral to do that.
You have to be able to win a lot of plays before the ball's even snapped.
Exactly.
That's part one with Greg Cosell and our own Nathan Zagura. Add more fun to your fandom with the Ballybet Sportsbook app. Download today and get $50 in bonus bets when you place your first wager of $10 or more. Ballybet, an official sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns. Part two of our interview with Greg Cosell and Nathan Zagura comes your way in just a couple minutes. Talking Cam Ward when we return. Cleveland Browns Daily is presented by Ballybet, an official sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Looking for more ways to connect with the Dog Pound and spoil a furry friend in your life? Join Barking Backers, presented by Milk-Bone, the official Cleveland Browns fan club for dogs. View membership options. Join today at barkingbackers.com. Jason Gibbs with you on this Thursday. Bo and Nathan off, enjoying some well-deserved time away with their families for spring break. Right now, part 2 of Nathan's interview with the legendary Greg Cosell talking Cam Ward at the Combine just a few weeks ago.
And anything about the greats,
You're down.
Peyton and Brady and Drew Brees, that's what they did. And then I think those guys, as young players in today's game, not Peyton obviously because of his pedigree, but it would be different, and you wonder what that would look like. And so I think
I've heard Brady talk. You know, they beat the Chiefs obviously in the Super Bowl with the Bucks, which was not that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it was 31-9. They killed him. And Brady, and I don't, he wasn't bragging. He was just saying, and we all know how difficult the Steve Spagnuolo defense is to play against. And he said, going into that game, I knew more about Spagnuolo's defense than he did. He said, I won the plays before the ball was snapped. Now, you know how hard that is to do? Yeah. Now, Brady's Brady, arguably the greatest of all time. But still, we're talking about the concept of playing that way.
Totally.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be just purely a pocket quarterback, which Brady was, then you really have to going to be good at that. That's where you have to get to. You don't expect a guy coming in as a rookie to be that, but that's kind of where you have to get to. I think C.J. Stroud, who does have a little bit mobility, but he's essentially a pocket quarterback, I think he kind of learned this year. This was a little bit of a learning year. The O-line wasn't quite as good. He started to play a little faster at times. He missed some throws that he normally
his accuracy,
makes.
Absolutely.
And I think he probably learned this year that, you know what? Now my next step in and you hope the coaches work with him on this, is I'm going to have to get the best I can be pre-snap, and I'm going to have to be better in squeezed pockets, because when you're a pocket quarterback, in the NFL there's going to be bodies around you, and you still have to execute. It's not an excuse that, my O-line isn't as good as it was. You still got to play.
Yeah.
You still got to play.
And play well.
Right.
Yeah, that's the job.
That's the job.
That's why they get the big bucks.
No one cares that your O-line may not have been as good as it was.
And nobody talks. Because the Eagles won in the manner in which they did, and I think people do lose sight of the fact that, yes, they have a tremendous offensive line, and they've done an incredible job replenishing that. Jalen Hurts, I think, is a uniquely great quarterback, and he's surrounded by Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley,
Dallas Goedert. And the best, clearly the best run-blocking O-line and a really good pass-protecting O-line.
Right. But they still have elite skill.
Correct.
And he is uniquely able
and by
to
the
do
way,
things.
They won in a way, and this is a great conversation too, they won in a way that we've certainly been led to believe in recent years you can't win in the NFL, because there were plenty of games this year where Jalen threw for 130 yards, and they won. Now, his magic sauce is he's phenomenal as a scrambler, and there were many, many plays this year that were 3rd and 7, and he runs for a first down, and that's a very meaningful part of his game, and he's terrific at it. But there were plenty of games where he threw 22 balls and threw for 130 yards. And, it's not a large enough sample size to say the NFL game is changing. But this year there were 6 backs that had over 300 carries. In 2023, there were no backs that had over 300 carries. So, again, we're not going to sit here and say the whole NFL game is changing, but it's just an interesting kind of fact that more teams ran the ball with greater volume.
Well, and it was also a response to the fact that, according to a great many people, that 2 high shells were invented in the year 2024. We had never seen those.
Right, and of course they weren't invented, but more and more teams were playing with that umbrella look. Yes, yes.
Right, we're not going to give up the chunks. And teams that could run block and have explosive running backs could get chunks on the ground. And the Eagles
Which is a great example of the evolution of football. I mean, with the Legion of Boom, everybody wanted to play cover 3.
Yep.
And then what happened was offenses clearly figured out how you can beat cover 3 because there's major voids in it. And then all of a sudden teams felt like, well, we can't really play cover 3 as our foundation because, teams are beating it. So now to take away the seams, teams said, you know what, we're not going to play cover 3.
Yep.
We're going to play with a 2 high safety structure because the seams aren't there.
Right, and we're not going to give up those chunks down the
No,
field.
exactly.
Make you matriculate the ball.
And that's why none of this is it's not a mathematical equation, and people view it as such. This is not black and white. It's not like there's one way to, this is, you know this because of what you do. You're around coaches, you hear the way they talk. None of this is we have the answers to everything. I was talking to a DC today, great conversation for 30 minutes, and he was talking about all his own concepts, and he said, hey, in all our zone concepts, we know where the stress points are. We have to let the players know where the stress points are. Because in zone, there's always going to be stress points. And he says sometimes the offense finds the stress points and they get a successful play, and you know what? You move on to the next play. It happens.
Everybody's good.
Right.
Their whole goal is to find those stress points and attack them.
Right.
And your whole goal is to try to minimize them and stop that.
Right. I mean, think of it this way. When you play zone, what you're trying to do in your zone concepts is compress space. For an offense, and Ben Johnson is a master at this, and he's not the only one, but he just came to mind. What they're trying to do is increase the space, and so now you have the defense trying to compress it, and the offense trying to expand it. And, sometimes the offense wins, sometimes the defense wins.
That's why it's a great chess match.
Yeah,
That's why it is the most fun that you can have. All right. I know you like Cam Ward a lot.
I do.
So let's talk about him for a second here because you and I could go on tangents.
Well, I love these,
It's fun.
The main point is I hope people understand that none of this is a math. It's not like saying 2 and 2 is 4. It's not, it's not a mathematical equation.
No, and whatever 2 and 2 today is in 4 years could be a completely different answer.
Right.
You might not even be able to do addition anymore. Now you got to be multiple.
Yeah. That's another question.
It all changes. Yeah. Let's talk about Cam and the things that you like. When you put the tape on with him, obviously the arm talent jumps off at you. Part of the evolution, I think, that you would say is, I know that there was a time when quarterback evaluators were so stuck on somebody's footwork because the feet had to marry to the concepts to deliver the football.
Right.
That's kind of
It still does. I mean, you can't say it doesn't. Because it's taught that way.
Of course. But you can be somewhat.
Right.
People throw at different bases now and it's just kind of customary.
And just so people understand, last summer I watched 7 games of Ward at Washington State from 2023, and in the last month I've watched probably 7 or 8 games from the U. So I've seen a lot of Cam Ward. To me, he's a high-level traits guy. He's got a live arm. The ball comes out of his hand. He can drive the ball with power. He can sit on his back foot and drive the ball. I thought he was efficient from the pocket. Does he need to clean up some footwork? Absolutely. He made some phenomenal throws outside of structure on the move. We've all seen those highlights, but there's plenty of other plays. While you wouldn't call him a creator, he certainly can run for a first down. So I guess, and I'm not looking, everybody said to me, where would he fit if he was in last year's draft? That's not relevant to me. He's in this year's draft.
I totally agree with that.
It's not relevant.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why he's not being talked about more as a really meaningful, potential high pick. I mean, the way people now talk, and I'm talking about coaches, talk about the quarterback position in the NFL, it seems to me he fits that mold. And I'm not going to sit here and compare him to Patrick Mahomes, but, stylistically, it's somewhat similar in that he can function from the pocket. He can make throw. Now, he's not, I wouldn't say he's as spatially aware as Mahomes or as special as Mahomes. We're not going to go there, and I don't want people to think that's what I mean. But just stylistically, there's a similarity.
Yeah. One of the first things I wrote down when I was doing Cam was he must have been a fan of Mahomes because you can see some of the things he does, some of, not the mannerisms, but the way he throws the football at times, and even Lamar where he's kind of flat-footed and he'll just fling it out there, that those things jump out at you. But his ability to really throw the football anywhere on the field with pace is kind of stunning to watch.
Yeah, no, I think he's a high-level traits guy. And I happen to know some people at Washington State, and they told me he's highly accountable, that he has an alpha dog personality, so that just made me feel even better. Normally, I don't get to find out that kind of stuff. I'm just sitting in my office at Films watching tape, but I just happen to know some people out there. So I don't understand why he's just not being talked about that way.
In your mind, that he's clear-cut. That's
in my mind.
If you're the Cleveland Browns, you want to come out of this draft with Cam Ward.
Yeah, and I can understand why, there's other points of view. I don't, you know me well enough to know I'm not one of those guys like, I'm right and you're wrong.
Sure.
There's so many variables. But to my mind, he's number one.
You've heard about Cam Ward with Greg Cosell. Now hear him talk about Shedeur Sanders after this quick timeout. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily, presented by Ballybet, an official sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns on 850 ESPN Cleveland. As the guys like to say, so much more to come, and this is it. Greg Cosell, Nathan Zagura, talking Shedeur Sanders from the Combine.
Do you think if we
You're up.
or maybe this is a something, just kind of, when I think of Shedeur's best traits, to me, it is accuracy, decision-making from the pocket. I think he's very tough. He will take hits and deliver the football. I think his arm is adequate. I don't think it's not Cam Ward's arm, but it's certainly good enough at the National Football League level. And maybe 10 years ago, we would have these guys flipped because of pocket winning is at its best, if he maximizes everything, the way that he would play the game is similar to the way that a Brady or a Breeze would play the game. I'm not saying he's those guys, but that's how he has to win.
But that's how he has to play in the league.
Correct. Right. What you're saying, and that is tougher now than it has been at any point in league history.
Correct. So when we spoke, 10 minutes ago about playing from the pocket and being pristine in pre-snap, post-snap, he has to be that guy. At his core, he's a ball distributor and an efficient executor.
Yep.
That's what he is. To use the basketball term, he's a point guard.
Yep.
Okay, that's what he has to be. I'm not saying he can't be that. I think that's harder to do right now. And I think there's a number of things he would have to clean up in order to do that. He has a glaring tendency to hold the ball with one hand. That has to be cleaned up.
Got to have two hands on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Second thing he has a tendency to do is he retreats backwards. You can't retreat backwards in the NFL. The only guy who can do that is Lamar Jackson, and he's a freak.
And Mahomes a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Mahomes has spatial
right.
awareness that's just ridiculous. You can't teach that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think there's some things that Shadir clearly has to clean up. But he throws a good ball. I think he sees it well. He actually does throw well on the run. But he's not a playmaker, but he does throw the ball well on the run. Can he run for a first down? Yeah, but
sure.
That's not his game.
Right.
So he has to be at the highest level of efficiency playing from the pocket.
And I think that would be something that you need to understand about him is his schematic understanding. One of the things that in my notes, I'm curious to see if you thought this as well with him, I felt like he did a very good job of understanding what a defense was doing, because there are lots of times where he would throw the ball and I'm watching it,
right.
and I like to pause it and I'm like, okay, where's the ball going to go?
Right.
And the ball's actually coming out of his hand and I'm like, I have no idea where this ball's going. And instead he knows where nobody's going to be and gets it to a receiver wide open.
I mean, there's no question he has really positive traits as a pocket quarterback.
Yeah.
And you know how it is. People then think, Cosell hates Shedeur. No, I don't.
No, I know you don't.
And I think he could be a good quarterback. I just think that's harder to play that way. And particularly to start his career, he would need to be on a team with a good O-line, with a viable run game. Doesn't have to be an Eagles run game, or a Titans run game. A Ravens run game. But he would need a viable run game. He need a defense that, for the most part, keeps the game relatively close, because you don't want him to be in a situation where he's got to put up 30 every week just to compete.
Right.
So I think he can be a good player. I don't think his overall traits level is what Cam Ward's is.
I think we agree on that completely. Right. Do you think for a Kai with those kind of traits, there's a couple kinds of offenses in the NFL now, and you go through these schemes, and I'm oversimplifying it greatly, but there is we'll call it Shanahan, McVay,
right.
O'Connell, some Ben Johnson, Stefanski,
right,
where they ask very particular things of their quarterbacks, and then there's kind of the others where the quarterback kind of is the offense, which is Josh Allen. Now I do schematic.
Right, obviously they still schemes, yes. I know what you're saying.
But
yes.
Some of them are more, okay, we're setting this up so that you're reading this, and if you read this correctly, you know that the ball goes here. If you see that, the ball goes there.
Right.
And can you execute that? Can you be an executor? So in your mind, is Shedeur, if the Browns say we're to get Shedeur, is that we at least have the kind of system in place that you think he would be in the best position to succeed in?
I think he could succeed in a Stefanski offense. The run game, obviously, the whole Chubb issue. I guess he's a free agent too, so who knows what their run game's going to look like.
Sure.
But he needs a run game. The O-line, I don't know about all the players that are there, whether there's free agents.
Hopefully Joel comes back. It should be at least plus. It's a plus offensive line.
Right. So, he would need that. I think he can execute a Stefanski offense without question. I think there's plenty of offenses he can execute well. The question is how quickly he can become that guy that can basically dominate pre-snap. Think of Joe Burrow, okay? And this is not a one-to-one comparison. I hope
no, but I've heard multiple people say something like that.
Yeah. Joe Burrow is a computer chip when it comes to pre-snap and post-snap.
Elite.
Yeah. Shadir's going to have to move in that direction.
Yep.
And he may be more than capable of it.
Yep.
Again, he maybe in 2 years that's what we were talking about him.
Right.
It's very possible. I'm not saying that can't be the case.
Yeah. You're saying, but that's what
that's what he's
maximize
gonna
his
have to
talents.
Be.
That's what he's got to be.
Yes.
Whereas Cam has the ability to kind of make something out of nothing more often.
I mean, when you look at the Mahomes and the Josh Allens, they're going to miss some throws within structure. But my guess is the coaching staff doesn't say, oh, man, you got to throw those balls or else, because they don't want to take away their ability to do that special stuff.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to say to Josh Allen, who, you know, makes ridiculous plays, you know, particularly running to his right, that, oh, you know what, you kind of missed Shakir there, you know, on that throw. You should have thrown it. You know, you don't want to say that to Josh, because you don't want him to start thinking, well, gee, do they want me not to move? Or, you know, you don't want to do that.
Let him play.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it does feel like at times in the league, the teams that are better on offense are more explosive, and that can come in a variety of ways. But it's hard to run 13 plays against these defenses and score at the end of it. You need kind of that chunk. And then my notes on chunk play machine. I just kept writing that at Cam Ward.
Right.
So that's something you look for.
Right.
And that's why I think in your evolution of what you do, that's why he jumps out so much.
Right. And again, just to reiterate, it doesn't mean that Shadir Sanders can't become a good player.
No, and he made plenty of chunks, but it's a different. There is a difference.
They're different players
Yep.
who ultimately will need to succeed differently.
Right. I'd even take it back to you mentioned kind of the Stroud and the Bryce Young draft. Those two are actually in some ways, I think, more similar in terms of how they're going to ultimately have to win in the league. They're going to have to win mentally.
I mean, you can argue. It's funny you mentioned Stroud. You can argue that coming into the draft, okay? We know what Stroud's done. He's been very good for the most part. But you could argue that Shadir Sanders is a lesser Stroud because he's smaller and he doesn't throw it as well. So, I mean, again, Stroud was a second pick in the draft, had a phenomenal rookie season, was up and down in his second year, but they still made it to the second round of the playoffs.
He's won a playoff game and won a division 2 years in a row.
I know, so you can't sit here and say, well, gee, Stroud's no good. So Shadir is in terms of pure talent, he's a lowercase Stroud.
Which would be
and that's
music
okay.
to our
Absolutely.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it comes to what you do to maximize those things.
Right.
What is, and we'll get you out of here because this is so fun.
This is great. I could talk to you all day.
What is, in your mind, coming off of what we saw and knowing how you like to dive into the schemes, what do you think? Because this is it's in some sense a copycat league. Some things can't be copycatted, and I think the way the Eagles do it really can't be because they start at 1st and 9, and nobody else in the league has figured out how to start every drive at 1st and 9.
Right.
What do you think will be kind of our defenses with the run game? Are they going to be like, okay, maybe we have to do a little more single hire? Do you think we're going to be in a phase for a while where they're saying our goal is to make teams do what we just said is hard, go on 12, 13 play drives?
Well, I'm going to answer that this way, and I think this wasn't talked about enough. And I remember at the Super Bowl, doing shows and talking about this a lot. I'm going to be very curious to see, because the Eagles are a 4-down offense.
100%.
And I think I'm curious to see if more teams are going to start doing that. Because if the Eagles have 4th, and none of this is 100%, but if the Eagles have 4th and 4 or less from the -40 going forward,
they're going.
They pretty much are going for it.
Yep.
And that changes the way you have to play defense against them. So I'm very curious to see if more teams are going to, and maybe that's a function of analytics, metrics, whatever you want to call it, but
and they're good at it.
They're really good at it.
Yeah. Well, it changes, and to your point, 3rd and 9 against most teams is just stop them short, and we get the ball back.
I mean, how many times do you see in the NFL, 3rd and 9, team gains 7, it's 4th and 2, and the defense gets so excited, everybody puts their hands up, it's 4th down? Well, the Eagles are going to go for that.
Eagles, Lions.
Yeah.
And by the way, both pretty successful teams, but that's my point. In the old days, you would say, let them check it down.
Right.
They can pick up 7
that's
and we'll
the other
tackle
thing.
them.
Let them check it down. We'll rally up and tackle them, and it'll be 4th and 3. Well, maybe you don't want to play a defense now where you'll let them check it down to gain 6 yards on 3rd and 9. So now it changes the way you play defense.
Which means now you might get beat for 29 on 3rd and 9.
Maybe you have to play more man.
Right.
Maybe you have to use a spy if you're going to play more man because Hurts can beat you with his legs.
Right.
It changes everything about how you play specific down and distance situations.
That's going to be fun because that's another layer to this chess match because it used to be assumed, okay, get the ball back. Now we don't know. And those become.
And that's why none of this is, like I said, a mathematical equation.
Right.
There's so many variables here.
I like, and I'm curious if I'm phrasing this right, what we're seeing is a shifting in what are actually the high leverage plays in the game.
Correct.
which I think is very cool. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, if you can be the most dominant team in a situation where you need 3 yards, you have an advantage on the league.
Right.
If you can gain 3 yards when you have to gain 3 yards or stop 3 yards when you have to stop 3 yards, you're going to be
And by the way,
an
it also
advantage.
changes offensive play calling. Because if you're 3rd and 7, you may run the ball now. Maybe running game becomes more viable. Because you know what? So you gain 4. Becomes 4th and 3.
Right.
I mean, it just changes a lot of things.
So there's a part of you, I think, that at this time of year, you are loving the prospects and the draft and all of that, but then you also can't wait to see what are the scheme changes that are going to come to this league that affect that chess match.
What I really love is the fact that there's so many variables. I mean, I love the fact that, there's so many ways to do things. One of the first things I learned, and this goes back 25, 30 years ago when I really started, because I started getting the coaching tape in 1992, and I had to learn the game that way, is I remember coaches telling me there's so many different ways to do things. And I think you have to understand that. There's not one way to do things here.
Yeah.
And, you can win a lot of different ways. And you can win a lot of different ways each week. Sometimes what you do week 4 is not what you're going to do week 5 against the next opponent.
Quite frankly, that better be the case, right?
Right.
You better be changing it every week.
Right. I mean, you're not reinventing the wheel.
No, but the tailoring.
Yeah.
The tailoring.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of really find fascinating. Because to me, and I know coaches think this way, you know this, for coaches, it's an academic and intellectual experience. We know football's a physical game. We know on defense you want your guys to hit people and rally, and, we know all that. But the actual, how do you put together a defense? How do you structure your own concepts? How do you do it? That's all academic and intellectual.
Well, then you know as well as I do, when they see something, they say, okay, we know they're going to do this.
Right.
When we show them this. So we're going to actually make this tweak.
Right.
And they see it pre-snap, and they start to get excited on the sideline, and then it ends up being a touchdown, and they knew it before the ball was snapped. That's
what they
live for.
The guy upstairs, because there's so many coaches upstairs who are watching specific things. Like, let's say it's offense. Let's say after 2 drives, the guy upstairs tells the guy on the bench, whether it's the OC or whether it's a quarterback, whoever's down on the field, say, hey, Joe, we ran that motion 3 times. All 3 times, here's how the defense reacted. Now they work off that.
Yep.
They don't just call plays.
Of course.
Yeah.
Think about what Andy Reid dialed up in the Super Bowl they won over the Eagles, where they knew when they ran that half motion that it was going to get kicked and they were going to get it wide open.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is the real fun of football.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
You're the best. This is the best.
I love these conversations are great.
The best.
And
Thank
that's
you so
what I
much.
hope people take away is that there's so many variables. It's this stuff's really hard. That's why coaches say it's hard to win on Sundays. It's really hard.
And the margins are smaller than ever.
Oh my God.
That's why it's the best.
Yeah.
You're the best. Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Always
it,
a
Nathan.
treat.
Thanks.
All right, the great Greg Cosell.
Thanks to Greg Cosell. Thanks to Austin Ward. Thanks to Kelsey Russo. Thanks to Tyvis Paul and Gerard Cherry, the G-Man, the J-Man. Everybody doing well. Enjoy the Sweet 16 games tonight. We are back with you tomorrow. The next level is next. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching the Cleveland Browns Daily, presented by Ballybet, a sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns on 850 ESPN Cleveland.